everybody, I'm Melinda Gallant, and I want to welcome you to another Cape Conversations. Oh my gosh, we've got a great show today. Oh, it's all about the Sandwich Schools System. Ooh, I don't know why we always get all upset over the Sandwich Schools System. It's a pretty good institution. And now it has a new leader, and his name is Joe Maruszczak. And he's a very nice man. So come along, let's have another Cape Conversation. Hi everybody, I'm Melinda Gallant, and I am very excited to have my guest here today. He is the superintendent, brand spanking new superintendent, at least for Sandwich, here. And I am so excited to talk with him, and now I'm going to try to say his last name, Joe Maruszczak.
Flawless, Melinda.
Good to see you.
Nicely
Maruszczak. Maruszczak.
Perfection.
Like, send me a check.
Please call
Joe.
me Joe, though.
I'm going to call you Joe from now on. My husband's name's Joe, so it's pretty easy to remember.
Easy to remember, yeah.
At my age, you never know. Anyway, so welcome to Sandwich.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh my gosh, we had a great, Pam was a wonderful
Absolutely.
Superintendent. And, she brought us through some tough times,
Sure.
I think.
Sure.
And now hopefully this is the upside of it, so it's a little easier.
Well, yeah. I can honestly say, and I know Pam would probably say the same exact thing, the last 2.5 years in the life of a superintendent, and just for all of us in education in general, by far the most challenging 2.5 years of my career. I don't know if we're quite at normalcy per se, but I like to view it as approaching normalcy is what I'll phrase it. And I can honestly say, I think we've gotten off to a super strong year here in Sandwich from the perspective of kids, families, educators. I think everybody's just kind of chomping at the bit to be like, hey, we're going to get back to the swing, and we're going to get back to normalcy, and we're going to get back to the joy of teaching and learning in school. So I'm optimistic. I'm super optimistic.
And Glory, you need to be, because you're the new guy. So you have to bring that optimistic attitude with you, so that it can transpire to everybody else, right?
Sure. I mean, I'm a big believer that when you're in a leadership position, like being a superintendent or a principal or whatever role, you set the tone. And I'm a big believer that one of the things that I love about my job the most is being able to connect with all different stakeholders within the schools, but within the community, to set a tone and to send a positive message about what the possibilities exist for the school district.
Well, and that's just it. Sandwich School System has always had a wonderful reputation. I think there are moments that it kind of went up and down.
Sure.
As I told you before we started, I had 3 kids go through the school system, and they are grown up to be quite successful.
Sure.
Granted, I had one that I wasn't quite sure about.
Oh,
However,
come on, Mom.
He made it, though. He's
He's doing just fine.
Right. Well, there was a teacher who taught my oldest. He taught him, I think he was physics. He was taking physics. And she was a wonderful teacher and very down to earth. And we were leaving an assembly when he was a senior, and he'd gotten an award for something, athletics, I think. But she was there, and we're walking out, and she goes, well, he's done very well. And I said, well, yeah, he's not an axe murderer. So I go, good job, Mom.
There's a real high bar.
There you go. If you're not a serial killer, if you don't raise one, good job. So that said, the school system, though, I think has lost some students recently. And
We have.
the problem is school choice. It's not a problem, but school choice is a big deal now. And I guess if you want to drive your kids or pay for the bus, they can send their kids to other schools.
Sure. It's really, it's a couple huge factors. One is just declining enrollment if you look at the birth data for the town of Sandwich,
right,
and how it's been on a steady decline. And So you've got that factor, but then you also just kind of have the housing crisis in
Right.
general here in Sandwich, but on the Cape on a whole. I can say firsthand, after getting this position in March and looking to find a place to live a full-time year-round here in Sandwich.
Very hard.
Not easy, not easy. So I think you've got that piece. But the second piece, to your earlier point, Melinda, I never thought when I started my career 32 years ago that we'd be talking about education as kind of like a competition of resources type conversation. We've got schools like Upper Cape Tech, we've got Sturgis, but then there's also, parochial and private school offerings that directly compete against us. So, families have the freedom to make choices about what is the appropriate, placement for their kids, and they have a lot of options. But I think, part of the work that I'm excited to do within the community and with our team is just kind of laying things out in very stark terms of why the Sandwich Public Schools is an outstanding option for all families, and particularly as students matriculate through the secondary grades, through middle school and high school, that I think that there's a lot of things that we can offer towards a more holistic education that you may not be able to receive at Sturgis or at Upper Cape Tech.
And that said, so is that one of your goals, is to either stop the flow out or try to get more flow in? I mean, because school choice works both ways. You could live in Barnstable Village and decide not to send your kids to Barnstable or a private school or a parochial school or Sturgis, the charter school, and send them to Sandwich. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And yes, to answer your question, it is definitely one of the goals, but it really comes down to, first and foremost, ensuring that across all levels we have very, very high expectations for our students, and there is academic rigor. You had talked about moving to the community in 1980, and the community having a great reputation as far as the best school district on the Cape. I think a lot of that is largely intact, but I think, again, your conversation about the ups and downs, I think moving through the pandemic, there was a huge emphasis on SEL, or social emotional learning.
Right.
Now, please don't get me wrong. I think that's extremely important, but I think we also have to balance things, and we have to balance that SEL piece with academic rigor. I think the good news, and within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be presenting to the school committee our MCAS results. There's a reality that coming through the pandemic, there really was learning loss.
Yeah,
and we're not where we used to be pre-pandemic in 2019, if you just look at that one snapshot of student performance. But if you also look at our performance relative to the other districts on the Cape, it is strong.
That's good.
So I do think that there is remarkable work happening in our schools, but I think constantly having that continuous cycle of improvement and having academically high expectations is going to be an emphasis of my work and my messaging.
That's wonderful. Well, so, I mean, they say even the summer break, which everybody needs.
Absolutely.
Kids lose something
Yeah.
over the summer. I mean, that's why, there's mandatory reading that everybody does at the last minute before they have to go back to school.
Yeah.
We've all done that.
Sure.
Even I did that when I was
Absolutely.
in school, and that was
Yeah.
100 years ago. However, that said, maybe now with you here, you'll bring a new kind of flow to that, or a new, as you said, rigor.
Yeah, I think it is it is what you choose to emphasize, and again, that point around, the tone that you can set, you know, and something that I laid out to all of the staff was, you know, I have already 10 years of experience as a superintendent, and something that I did in my previous district was 2 to 3 times a week, I did classroom walkthroughs. And I don't do it to evaluate anybody in specific.
You're not taking a pad of paper with you.
Absolutely not. It's just myself and the principal doing 15 to 20 minutes in each and every single classroom. And I do it because I'm genuinely interested in what our kids are learning.
Sure.
I'm interested in what our teachers are teaching. And I think it sends a message that my primary focus is teaching and learning. My primary focus, and again, the superintendency is a super complicated job, and you constantly have a ton of balls up in the air. But my primary mission is to improve teaching and learning in this district. And again, part of my work is symbolic, but I think the substance behind it is showing, hey, knowing what's happening in the classroom and what our kids' experience is by far the most important thing. And it's the most important work.
So now you told me a quick story about going through the schools, what one of the students said. What did they say to you? Or say to the principal, I should say.
That the student said to his teacher, hey, who's that guy with with Principal Hill, Trish Hill at Oak Ridge? He seems to be a really smiley guy, or something to that effect.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, you are smiley.
Well,
you know, that helps.
yeah.
You know, if you're always glum, then everybody's afraid of doom and gloom.
You can't take yourself or your job too seriously.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah.
I always say, don't believe your own publicity.
True.
Or you're in
Yeah.
trouble. So tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, here you are. You're married. You got kids?
I do. I have 2 daughters. I have Allison, who's 26. And
Oh, wow.
Allison,
You look too young to have a 26-year-old.
I'm not. And Allison is a speech language pathologist at
Oh, wow.
Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. And she
wonderful.
lives in Watertown. And then my baby is, I have a second daughter, Molly, who's 22, and
Wow.
she is in her senior year at Johnson & Wales
wow.
University in Providence as a hospitality major.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And you have a wife,
I
and she's
do
a teacher.
have one of those
so
as
she's
well.
going to give you the teacher perspective, whether you want it or not.
Pretty much, yes, yes.
That's a good thing.
My wife, Dee Dee, is a teacher of now 35 years
Wonderful.
in the Warwick, Rhode Island Public Schools. She teaches 6th grade coding, does a fabulous job with it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't know what coding is, you want to tell me what it is?
It is basically the language that you use to create like HTML, to create
For
websites.
computer.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Excellent.
So she, for the overwhelming majority of her career, she taught middle school science, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, right before the pandemic, she had an opportunity to do this comprehensive program through an organization called Code.org. And you know how we just go through different parts of our career where you need kind of like a shot in the arm and to do something new? She had the opportunity to kind of transition to be a specialist teacher teaching coding, and she's absolutely loved it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So now tell me, you're not commuting, are you?
No. So, you know, my wife and I, we still have our home in East Greenwich, Rhode Island, but we're also renting a place here in Sandwich. And I think the game plan will be my wife is eligible to retire at the end of this school year, which she will do. And I think we will probably, in all likelihood, purchase something here in Sandwich.
Oh, wonderful.
Good Lord willing.
Yeah, well, and the prices come down,
Well,
and the
yeah.
interest
I mean,
rates
I
aren't
think,
too high.
yeah, I think the market is slowly stabilizing, but
It is. It is.
yeah, through the spring and the summer, it's really been crazy.
My husband and I have to laugh. When we moved here in 1980, we bought a home in 1982, and the interest rates were 17%. And so everybody's complaining, oh my God, it's going up.
6%.
What are we going to do?
Yeah.
You know, their hair's on fire, their heads exploding.
Yeah.
I'm going, relax, it'll go down. And it does.
Yeah.
It always does. And
Yeah.
you refinance your house.
Yeah.
Anyway, all that said, so what are some of the plans you're thinking about, just out there? Things that you're thinking about. There's a lot of things that people automatically say when they get somebody new in your position. We've got to change this, and I have a feeling you're the kind of guy that goes, well, let's take a look. And
this is more of a year, Melinda, to kind of learn the lay of the land. I'm a big believer. Your first year in, you do a heck of a lot more listening than speaking or kind of putting your pieces out there. I had the opportunity during the summer to do 3 different kind of meet the superintendent coffee hours at the town library.
Nice.
I'm going to do a little bit more this fall. I think there, again, through the summer, there was a strong sentiment of we're really excited to get back to normalcy. Some of the kind of no-brainer things that will really get the ball, up and running with is related to student safety. I think through the pandemic, for obvious reasons, a lot of those safety drills, things like shelter in place or evacuation and reunification were put on hold. So we've put together a district-wide and town-wide safety committee to kind of review and actually get those drills up and running, and we're dedicating our district-wide PD day on January 13th to just that type of training. So that's a theme that comes up. Communication, I think in our business it is the perpetual goal. So thinking about ensuring that there's consistent communication coming from our 3 buildings and from the district to families is also something that we're making some progress, but you'll see future plans and future ways to communicate with homes.
Well, we have a senior population here, a retirement population in Sandwich, as we've talked about, the numbers going down partially because we're a retirement community.
Yeah.
And that said, though, for the school to get things passed, you have to engage them. And I've always said, no offense, because you're new,
Sure.
The Sandwich schools, I think all schools, there aren't very many that do this well, do not do a good job at promoting themselves, market themselves.
Yeah.
To say, hey, did you know that we had 2 National Merit Scholar people in the school? Did you know that we had 5 kids go to Harvard and 3 to Dartmouth and whatever? Did you know that our percentage of our population that goes on to higher education is XYZ? This is why Sandwich School is so important. And well, I hope that changes, because I think Sandwich School System does do a good job, but nobody knows it.
Yeah, and that is part of the communication piece, but also the public relations piece of getting the good news out there as far as what's happening. And I think we've done some of that, but again, I think it's a perpetual goal of meeting people where they are, and using a whole variety of different media to push the word out and the good news out and so on.
Well, I'll suggest the Newcomers Club. I don't know if you've heard of them.
No, I haven't.
Well, they're mostly retired people, but boy, are they movers and shakers when push comes to shove. So you might want to say, I want to try to figure out how to be invited to talk to them, because they would like to meet you, I bet. A lot. I mean, because obviously you impact our taxes, and
Yes.
and I'm sure you've heard about it.
A tiny bit, yeah.
Not much, though,
and
right?
I also had the pleasure of going to last May's town meeting. Yeah.
There you
so
go.
I saw
Yeah.
the wheels in motion, so to speak.
Yeah, and I personally, I don't have kids in school anymore. I have grandkids that are in schools other places. And that said, I still vote for everything here, because why do I want to have people raise dumb kids? I mean, that's how I think of it.
Well, and I'm also a big believer in the whole concept of pay it forward. That, you had your time within the community where your kids benefited from really the altruistic sense that people have toward their schools, but for the good of their community. Now it's time to pay it forward to a new generation. But I also think that there's a real pragmatic side to this. To me, the number one indicator of the health of a community is the quality of its school district.
Absolutely.
And oh, by the way, we have this thing called property value, and the number one factor that determines what the value of your property is or how desirable the community is how good is the school district.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it's maybe the best way forever to and it's been this way forever, is to make the schools depend upon property values.
Yeah.
And maybe down the road that'll change. I don't see it in the coming future for sure. However, that said, we do need to be thinking about that because it does affect our property values. And we wonder why real estate is so high on the Cape and why it's difficult housing, which is a huge issue on the Cape. It's because a lot of people, we're not making any more of it, and a lot of people want to live here.
Absolutely.
Because it's quiet, it's relatively safe, and that's a big deal right now. And our school systems are pretty doggone good, especially Sandwich. I mean, I guess.
I couldn't agree more.
That's the only reason why I said it, so you'd agree with me.
But those are truisms that are definitely applicable to Sandwich. And, again, most communities that would be considered to be desirable communities to make a serious investment in a house and raise a family.
I would like to go back to safety just for a minute because, as we all know, the headlines, it seems like every quarter or every few months there's terrible headlines.
I think the sad reality that we're living in, Melinda, is it is not a question of if, it's a question of when.
And that's what's scary.
Last evening, we had a meeting of the DEI Advisory Committee, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and we were kind of having a larger conversation around creating a culture where there's safe space to have difficult conversations.
Sure.
And one of the difficult conversations was back in whenever it was, I think it was late May, early June, when Uvalde happened.
Yeah, I know.
And there were some teachers that, allowed kids to talk about it. And I think there were some classrooms where it was just really, really challenging. And I don't think all of our educators are necessarily equipped to...
or comfortable.
Exactly. But I think it's the sad reality that these are the unfortunate times that we're living in. And we have to do everything that is possible to ensure that our schools are appropriately safe, they're fortified, but also the human behavior, how we train staff, how we train kids, also is aligned with, being as safe as it possibly can be.
Well, and that's a huge job.
Yeah.
However, that said, you're working already with putting, with a committee or a group to ensure the safety as much as you can, I guess. I know the school, they do the lockdown. You can't get into the school unless you buzz, and, you have to have a reason to be there, and you're not going to hang out on school grounds. Do you still have a resource officer in the schools?
We do. We have a brand new school resource officer, Matt Cotter, who just started the first day of school.
Oh, great. And that certainly helps, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
And his interaction with students and what have you.
Absolutely. I think it's another layer of reassurance for students, but also for our families and staff as well. Sure.
So, you're here now, and you're going to stay. Even though you've seen all our warts.
No, after, what is it now? Yeah, 3.5 months. No, I don't think anybody's driven me out of the community yet, nor do I see that happening.
What do you see yourself wanting to do as far as, community involvement? Do you find that you want to be a part of anything, or do you have such a big job that you're taking a deep breath and saying maybe?
Well, there's a lot of work that I'm passionate about within the school, but it kind of it falls a little bit more deeper, and it kind of falls in line with my core values, not only as an educator, but also as Joe the guy. And let me give you a tangible example. Okay. I've been going back and forth with Heather Harper, who's the assistant town manager.
Yeah, I know Heather.
On we're looking at Sandwich is looking at doing what needs to be done so that we will have the green community designation from the state. That was work in my previous district in Mendon Upton Regional that I was involved with both towns.
Wow.
The district, during my tenure, we did a lot of work around solar and establishing solar carports and basically making 100% of the district's electricity coming from solar.
Wonderful.
And as a result, we got a Green Ribbon Award from the U.S. Department of Education, which was great. Yeah. And so that's the type of work that I'm really, really passionate about. We have a gentleman in town, a guy by the name of Tom Dorney, who is a retired educator himself, who's come to the school committee to kind of speak passionately about what would it take to actually get a fleet of electric buses. And he looks at it from the perspective of greenhouse gases being emitted. Right. I'd love to get involved in that work to benefit not only the school district, but also the community in large.
So your office is going to be moving. I don't know where your office is currently.
It's at the Wing School.
It is still at the Wing School. I wasn't sure. But you're going to be moving to when the senior people move to the new lifestyle place. You're going there, right?
To the Human Services building on Quaker Meeting House.
Yeah, not 130 on Quaker. Have you ever been on top of the hill? Behind the school, there's a big hill, and they have some fields. I watch my grandson play soccer. They actually beat Sandwich. He's from Falmouth. I've sat up there for baseball games.
Sure.
There's a lot of wind up there. Has anybody thought about putting up a windmill up there?
Nobody's approached me about it.
Go up there and take a barometer, a wind barometer. I'm telling you, there is always a wind up there. Yeah. It's never just hot and dry. There's always a wind. And speaking of the carports, that would be a wonderful thing. They're doing them all over the place. All over the place now.
It's becoming pretty mainstream.
Yeah.
I know Heather, we haven't had detailed conversations, but I know there's definitely a push to see what more can we do with solar. And I would love the school department to be a partner with that.
And how many days have you been here, or months?
I came here, Dee Dee and I moved into our place at the end of June, and I started on the job July 1st.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, my gosh, you better get moving, because you're just sitting around, it sounds like. No, you've been here, 5 months, something like that?
Not even that, 3.5,
yeah. So, anyway, well, congratulations on the job.
Thank you.
As I said, you're a smiley person. I didn't even get into the fact that I'm really big on cultural arts for kids and involvement, and I'm also really big on the television studio, radio studio up there, and all of that stuff. So maybe for our next conversation.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So nice to meet you.
Likewise, a pleasure.
And I can't wait to meet your wife sometime.
She'll be around.
Excellent, good. Well, grab her for Sandwich Arts Alliance.
Will do.
Maybe she'll want to be a painter or something.
Maybe.
You never know. Anyway, thanks so much.